Welcome to episode 212 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to share some thoughts on grounding down into a clear vision and direction for the future, even when others are not on board. Visit truthforteachers.com to get the transcript or find our Truth for Teachers podcast community on Facebook. In lieu of a typical message from our sponsors this week, I wanted to share about some products of my own that you might not realize that I offer. Did you know that I've published 5 books, 5 courses, and have 70 downloadable printable resources for teachers? It has been a long labor of love. I started creating these materials in 2008, and I have built a steady collection of materials over time, tackling topics like productivity, enjoying teaching, mindset, and classroom management. The printable and downloadable resources include growth mindset and working memory activities, a report card comment system designed to take half the time of your current process, feedback comments for student writing, and more. The most recent addition is emergency subplans for every grade level K-12. I co-created these with a team of practicing classroom teachers to produce high-quality, rigorous activities that students can do when you're absent. So those are some of the printables. In terms of courses, I have the 40-Hour Teacher Workweek Club, of course, but I also have Finally Free, which is an audio collection designed to address teacher anxiety. And I have the Fewer Things Better project, which can help you figure out how to eliminate, automate, and delegate your workload. To learn about any of these resources or to discover what else I've created, just go to my website, which is thecornerstoneforteachers.com. In the navigation menu, you will find links to my books, my printables, and my courses. Thank you for supporting my work. Each purchase helps make it possible for the many, many free materials that I offer, like this podcast, to be available to educators everywhere at no cost. So happy 2021, friends. I am back after a December sabbatical, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that process with you in episode 213 in terms of what I learned from that time off and what I'm reflecting on. But I wanted to kick off season 13 of the podcast with an episode about one specific thing that I realized during my sabbatical that I hope will be energizing for you to hear. Obviously, a lot has happened in the U.S. since I last released a podcast episode in late October. And I hope that this episode shares a bit of insight as to a path forward for us, both individually and collectively. And I'm not just talking on a political or worldview or sort of macro level here. As I go through this episode, I think it'll be clear that this applies to lots of small aspects of our lives, small choices that we make as well. But I do want to tie it into the larger big picture just because I think it's on everyone's mind right now. And I think we're all sort of struggling to think, okay, there's so many different people believing so many different things. What is the thing that unites us? How do we move forward? What is the future going to look like for us? And as 2020 came to a close, I personally was reflecting a lot on how there are so many fundamental issues that all humans are simply never going to agree on. And I've been reflecting on how I need to allow people to take their own journeys. I need to not argue with them or try to educate them unless they're open to the discussion and it's worth the energy. Because in many ways, I have let folks who are going in different directions than me become a very big distraction to my work and the places that I'm trying to go. I've really felt the need recently to ground down into what I'm doing and where I'm going and stop worrying so much about people who aren't on board with that. So I was sharing these reflections with my husband, and he said, it reminds me a little bit of jazz. Jazz is one of the great forms of music today, but it wasn't universally respected in the beginning, and a lot of people just didn't get it. And the jazz musicians didn't say, well, some people don't like jazz, so we should switch. We should play country music instead. They just kept playing the jazz. And the people who liked jazz supported them, and it grew in popularity organically over time. And to this day, there's still people who don't like jazz, and that's okay. that does not hurt jazz. Jazz still thrives and evolves regardless of the fact that not all people like it. The jazz musician's job is to keep playing the jazz, not to conform to the whims of every individual around them, but to commit to following through on what they are passionate about and let the like-minded folks come. You don't have to convince everyone to like jazz in order to be a successful jazz musician. And in fact, if you spend all your time trying to persuade people who can't stand jazz that they should like it, you're going to become too distracted and discouraged to produce the beautiful music that so many people are depending on you to create. Oh, friends, when my husband said that to me, that analogy hit me hard because I have spent way too much time trying to get people to like me and like what I create instead of playing for the people who already appreciate who I am. Can you relate to that? I have made far too many decisions in my life and with my online platform that are trying to entice people who don't like jazz to listen to it anyway. Going forward, I am committed to jazz. I am playing the jazz and I'm playing alongside my husband. We have confirmed our commitment together that we are not going to get caught up in people who don't share our same vision. And we're not going to waste too much time explaining ourselves or justifying ourselves. I don't want to waste a single drop of energy getting annoyed with people who see things differently or not on board with the vision because they don't have to be. I can and should still do the work that I need to do anyway. On a bigger level, for me personally, I need to spend more time supporting people who are marginalized and less time trying to convince the folks who don't want to see or understand it that they should come on board with that mission. And that's where we come to my next analogy. Now, my husband's a musician, so of course he's going to think of a musical analogy. That's why he thought about jazz. But for whatever reason, I'm thinking about a train. Now, I'm going to be purposely vague here about what the train represents because I think it can apply to a lot of different things. And again, I want to go macro and micro. I want to look at what's going on collectively as a society and also what's going on personally in our own lives. I want you to insert your own thing here, provided, of course, that it's something that you want to see happen that will help rather than harm people. The train that you're on is about to leave the station and head off towards its destination. It's headed off toward that goal that you're trying to achieve with your life or in your life. And there may be a lot of folks hanging around the train station protesting where it's going, but the engine's running, the train's loaded up with people, the train is leaving the station. The naysayers cannot stop this train. They can get left behind by the train, they can get run over by the train, or else they can get on board. But they cannot stop it. The train is leaving the station. You are on board that train, and it is your job to help steer it toward where you want to see it go. It is not your job to try to persuade all those folks grumbling at the train station that they should come on board. I am on board the train toward progress right now. I'm working toward a better version of myself, my marriage, my home, my life, my contributions to the field of education, and more broadly toward a more inclusive and equitable way of running our schools, our communities, our budgets, our government. I want to see all of us win. I want to see all of us succeed. I want to see people of all races and genders and nationalities. I want the best for all of us. And there are people in the world who are just not on board that train. They want to see some groups elevated over others, or they believe that there is a hierarchy in society that needs to be upheld, or that certain countries or certain states or certain people groups deserve more than others do. Those folks are just not on board the same train I'm on. They're just not. And they're going to be left behind by their choice because the alternative is for this train that I'm on to wait for everyone to get on board. And if we do that, this train is never going to move. If you don't move forward until all the people who don't want you to move forward get out of the way, the train is just going to idle in the station for all eternity. The train has to leave the station with however few people might be on board, because if it keeps going, it will pick up more people along the way. and it will keep progressing in the direction of its destination. This is my mindset going into 2021. If you want to get on board the train that I'm on, that's great. If not, that is fine too. I have to keep moving. And this is not a hateful or angry or dismissive or passive-aggressive movement forward. It's about being just super focused on the goal, on focusing in on the destination that I want to get us to and going there. We don't have to convince everybody. We can organize with like-minded folks, welcome them on the train as it begins to fill up, and then use that to move toward the direction we want to go in. This single-minded focus on getting to the destination, hopefully picking up more people at each consecutive stop, but rolling on regardless. Because with the way that we're all interconnected now online, it's possible to niche down and find the smallest possible group of people who share your interests and your vision. We're not going back to a time decades ago where everyone watched the same 6 p.m. local news broadcasts and attended the same local church, the only one in town, sent all their kids to the same local public school. There's choice now with everything, with what we eat, where we go, what hobbies we like, with our news sources, with the type and philosophy of school you send your child to, with the type and philosophy of religion that you may choose to be part of, all kinds of things. You can find other people wanting to do what you're wanting to do, no matter how obscure it is, or how few people there are in your local area who are interested. Now, there's positive and negative aspects. This, of course, we have seen people rally and communicate together around very dangerous and upsetting ideas. But what's happening here about the fact that you can connect with other like-minded folks, it's a reality. There's some good to it, there's some bad to it, but it is what's happening. This is what is happening in 2021. So trying to appeal to everyone is no longer possible, and it's no longer necessary. And I think if we really dig down deep, we can see the only way you get everyone to agree on something is to suppress the voices of the people who disagree and make it dangerous for people to live their lives differently than the norm. That's not a place that I'm trying to go. We're just not all going to agree, and I'm accepting that. I do want to be clear, of course, about choosing the trains that we're on, because everyone thinks they're on the right train, right? Even people that we look at and we're like, you are on the wrong train, you are going in the wrong direction. They think they're on the right train. So it's important to thoroughly vet your train before climbing on board. My beliefs, as far as I can tell, do not harm others, do not endanger them, do not incite violence or discrimination against them. That's the check that I try to come back to. Am I hurting or am I helping? Am I lifting up or am I pulling down? And if I'm confident through self-examination and being plugged into sources other than just ones that I agree with, if I'm really confident after lots of examination that I'm on a path that is for the well-being and betterment of all of us, I'm working toward collective liberation, then my job is to get on board that train and keep playing the jazz. Some people will not like it. They will get on a different train. That's fine. I don't have to change to suit their preferences. I want to have a single-minded focus on the destination right now. A train cannot go in multiple directions at once. What is my mission? What is my contribution? What is the thing that I can be doing right now in the world to make it a better place? And then be on board that train. Other folks might get on board a very different train. They might head in the opposite direction, but I can't get where I'm going if I'm worried about their train. And that's where I've made mistakes in the past. And maybe you have too. I have spent entirely too much time delaying my own train in order to get folks on board who had zero interest in coming along. My tendency, because I want to be inclusive and because I want to be liked and I want to be understood, is to stand at the train station trying to convince folks this is the right train. Here's why you should be on board. Here's why the places that we're going are the correct place and you should want to go there too. I am letting go of that burden of trying to convince people to get on board this train. It is not my responsibility, and it never was. I have wasted so much time explaining myself to people who didn't want to understand me. I have wasted so much energy trying to convince people who don't want to be convinced. I have not moved forward because I didn't want to go without everyone else alongside me. And that choice has held me back. So I encourage you to think about what train you are on for 2021. And I think it will probably be multiple trains, right? I mean, this is all just a metaphor anyway. So let's get loose with it. Let's imagine that you can be on more than one train at a time. Maybe there's some professional trains that you want to be on, some personal trains, and so on. I'll give you an example. Maybe you and two of your colleagues are on board a particular train for a more human-centered, grace-filled, compassionate way of teaching during this pandemic. And the rest of your colleagues are taking a very hardline stance that you don't feel is responsive to kids' needs. So you're on board the train with these two colleagues, but instead of heading down the tracks and moving forward to a deeper professional practice and better relationships with your students, you are delaying your own train by standing in the station and arguing with your other colleagues. You're trying to persuade them to come on board a train that they have no interest in boarding. And they would probably try to sabotage and run it off the tracks if you manage somehow to coax them on board. Sometimes what you need to do is just let them stand around the station and complain about where you're going. Because your train is not the only one. That's the great thing about trains, right? There's always another one right behind it. So maybe your colleagues will catch the next train. Maybe there will be something about the stops along the way of that route, or something about the people on board that train, or maybe the timeline of that next train that will appeal to them a bit more, and they'll get on board then. But regardless, you can't hold up your train waiting for them. That only delays the progress of all the trains coming up behind you. Keep moving forward. Blow the whistle as a warning, and then pull that train out of the station. Your colleagues can always catch up with you at a later stop if they want, or catch the next train. Or they can spend the rest of their careers grumbling at the station. They can even board a train heading in the opposite direction. Don't let any of those choices stop you from where you need to go. So think about the train that you want to be on professionally and get on board. Is there something you've been wanting to try with your students, but you've been waiting for others to do it too? If so, map out the next stop along the way to that destination. Just figure out one stop, the very next stop, the next right step, and get that train moving. You might find other like-minded folks at the next stop, and they'll come on board and they'll help you plan where to go next. Think also about the train that you want to get on in your family life or your relationships. You know, I shared this train analogy with a friend who has preteen and teenage children, and one child in particular is always resistant to what the rest of her family wants to do. And she started thinking about this train analogy with that child. She didn't say it to the child necessarily, but it kind of reframed her thinking. And she just started taking this approach of, we're doing this today, and it's fine if you don't want to. You don't have to. We're not going to let this one family member prevent everyone else from having a pleasant day together. Kids have their own trains they need to follow. They have their own path in life that they need to carve out, and they might not ride with you all the time. You might run on parallel tracks, or you might pick them up at a future stop. We're just not all going to be on the same trains at the same time. So, is there a train that just needs to pull out of the station in your home, even if everyone is not on board? Consider that as well. Think about a train that you want to get on in your personal life, a habit or a routine or a lifestyle that you want to incorporate. Think about the train you want to be on in terms of shaping this world into a better place. And then get on board. Don't be like me and spend years arguing with people about why your train is going somewhere they should want to go to. Don't let other people frustrate you because they don't have the same vision. Make your all aboard announcement and head on out toward your destination. Get really clear on where you're going. Where do you want to take your students? Where do you want to take your family, your personal relationships, yourself? Get that train out of the station. You might even want to play some jazz on board. Have a great week. You can do this. And remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it.